So what kind of a person joins a cult anyway? They must be some kind of simpleton, huh? I would never do a thing like that. No, never. I get that in the comments all the time. And I make a lot of those comments too. I make them to myself when I'm doing the videos. I'm like, what kind of a person would even do this? But you would be surprised what kind of a person joins a cult. And when I start listing off these characteristics, you might be surprised to learn that you have a few of them too. Now, my regular viewers are much less likely to join a cult than the average person, but that's just because we've gone through so many different cults. So they kind of know what to look for. They're practiced. Basically, my viewers know to leave the building once they start talking about changing names and arranging marriages. See you, goodbye. Thanks for dinner. Thanks for the dance. Goodbye now. What's in this drink? First of all, let me remove the idea that the people who join cults are dumb people. If this were the case, it would be an easy solution. Just keep an eye on your dumb friend. But alas, it is not the case. Your dumb friends might have to keep an eye on you. Smart people, more highly educated people are more likely to join cults because cults have doctrines, and doctrines require study and abstract thinking. So students, perfect. Dumb people, I guess, are just too dumb to understand why they should care if the universe is a simulation. They're too dumb to care about the Holy Trinity. They're too dumb to care which avatar Vishnu presents himself. For the record, much of my research today comes from these two papers. The papers are called Who Joins a New Religious Movement and Why? 20 Years of Research and What We Have Learned. This article is by Lorne L. Dawson, and also the famous Saul Levine essay, The Joiners. Now, these are great starter articles, but also they came before social media. So of course we have a lot to add because we've just learned so much more over the past few years with this social media revolution. Aren't we so lucky? Aren't we so lucky to have had a crash course over the past few years? May you live in interesting times, huh? You can just go online now and watch cults form and collapse. In fact, it seems to me that cults are just popping up everywhere and social media is helping them spread. Honestly, I don't really know how I would go about finding out if there were more cults now than there ever were before, because a lot of these just, they grow and then they disappear and there's very little record of them. So we may know of a lot of cults now that there's a written record of them, but going back to 1900, how do we know there's a written record? But society in 2023, it's 2023 now as of shooting, has more institutional and psychological pressures that drive people into cults than it has ever had in the past. So it's not unreasonable to think that there are more cults now than ever before. I really just don't know. I don't even know how you would tabulate the research. A lot of stuff just gets lost to history. Let me first recognize that people who join cults tend to be younger, between the ages of 16 and 26. Why those ages? Well, because they have split from their families, from their parents' control, and they haven't formed a family of their own yet. Most parents, thank God, most parents will not put the interest of a strange group ahead of their children. Of course, some will, unfortunately. Don't be the one that does this. That's just tacky, and your kid will trash talk you in therapy for the rest of their lives. It's not an absolute, but yes, most are young adults. We have been over this a million times, why young adults are more malleable. Many have not formed a sense of identity yet, so others come in and do it for them. Now that brings me to the second reason young people are more likely to join. Some do not want to be independent. They leave the comfort of their families, and well, what is there? Well, for well-adjusted people, I like to think we're well-adjusted. We make friends and we take up activities. We go out into the world and we navigate it. Not everybody can do that. It's actually really difficult for some people. Some people leave their families and they still want the same tight structure of a family. They don't want to have to earn friends because you got to earn friends. A cult, you have a built-in social circle. You have a built-in family. And you're like, well, but I make friends easily. I don't have to worry about getting caught up in a cult. Not so fast, because most people are recruited into cults by friends or family members. In this way, cults are like Ipsy or HelloFresh. I know we all have someone trying to get us to join HelloFresh so they get $10 off, which is fine. Now imagine the difficult position a teen would find herself in if she only had one good friend and that good friend joined a cult. Well then, there's a chance she's going to join a cult too. Of course, we know people who are recruited by their parents. I've got a Rate My Cult coming up next week of a very famous person born into a cult. Now, in this situation, it's the parents who joined. And of course, the child did not have the personal agency to resist this. So I'm just going to do an audience poll. How bad of a parenting fail is joining a cult and dragging your kids into it? Okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the virgin mother and 10 being Casey Anthony, where do parents who join cults fall? No judgment. Answer honestly. Now, there's this very old model of who joins a cult from 1965 by Lofton-Stark. Now, they say that there are 7 characteristics. 7 characteristics must be present for a person to join a cult. There must be some tension in their lives. They must seek to solve this tension through religion as opposed to, I don't know, like sports or psychiatry or hobbies or something like that. They become religious seekers. I have warned you about that. What you are seeking is inside of you, not in some teepee in Nevada. They're at a turning point in their lives. They form a tight bond with one or more members of the cult. They reduce attachments outside of the cult. And they have intensive interactions with other converts. They bond. Now, this model has been disputed over the years. People study cults and say, well, 2 or 3 of these wasn't present in the cult that I studied. Or they study a cult and they say, well, all 7 of them applied to people who joined. It really depends on the cult. We have seen just from my Rate My Cult videos how many different kinds of cults that there are, and each one attracts its own kind of people. There's Christian cults, there's New Age cults, there's science cults, etc., etc. So many. In fact, one of the major selling points of a cult is admiring the people who are a part of it. If a person goes to the cult compound and sees a lot of young, healthy, smart people, they want to be a part of that group. You remember high school, you go and you see the cheerleading squad and you're like, oh my God, they're so beautiful. I want to be a member. Or you see the basketball team, like they're so athletic. Or you see the debate club, whatever team or group you wanted to be a part of in high school, it's like that. A fraternity. Fraternities and sororities are also similar to this. You go and you see them and they look so cool and you're like, oh, I want to be one of them. And sometimes you get to be. You're very lucky. So wanting to be part of a group, but not wanting to put the effort and awkwardness into forming or joining a friend group is a warning sign that a person is cult material. This is scary because we have a whole generation of people coming up who have not developed the necessary friend bonds to prevent them from joining. This is what I mean when I say that in 2023, we have a lot more social pressures on young people, and they're very different now than they were even in the 1960s. That's why some of these articles, you read part of the articles and they're kind of outdated. We have cults online now, and people have less friendships and see each other less in person. Now, how can you prevent this from happening to you or someone you know? Go hang out with your friend in real life, IRL. Go hang out with them. Go roller skating, get some ice cream. When you can't see them face to face, text them memes. I love texting people memes. They always welcome the memes. Just remember that it's a very big world out there and you don't have to join this small little group. Now, there is a debate as to whether religious people are more or less likely to join a cult. And the answer is basically, it depends. It depends. Now, Dawson called people with no religious upbringing the unchurched. And apparently there is some data to suggest that people who do not have deeply held religious or ideological convictions are more likely to join. However, this is not always the case. This might be the case for some secular cults like Scientology, but it wasn't the case for the Christian cult, the Moonies. So really, it just depends. Some people, I guess, have a void where religion should have been, but there never was. So here comes the cult to help out. Others just like following the rules and they like the ritual because that's what they grew up with. One very interesting thing is that Protestants are underrepresented in cults. Catholics are represented just right according to their population, and Jewish people are overrepresented in cults. Now, these Jewish people could have grown up secular and atheists, and therefore their ethnically Jewish, but they are technically the unchurched. We just don't know why that is. Just found that interesting when surveying all these people who had joined cults in the 1960s. Of course, there are Protestant cults. We've been over them, but Protestants already have an established church structure, which makes it much less likely that they're going to go ahead and join this new thing. Unless, of course, this church structure strikes them as plastic, and then asterisk, they might. Now, I know what you're going to say. You're going to be like, well, aren't these mega churches, these Protestant mega churches we see kind of like cults already? Whatever, man. Why you got to ask all these questions all the time? Just saying what I found. And a lot of people, like my regular viewer, have probably given a lot of thought to the big questions in life. What is the meaning of life? Who is the creator? Do I have a purpose? Look, I'll tell you right now, it's ice cream, it's Mattel, and you wouldn't get it if I told you. So don't even worry about it. But people who seek answers to these big questions are called seekers. And wouldn't you just know it, that when these people are seeking, that is when these cult recruiters happen to find them, when they're at their lowest. What are the odds? It must be serendipity, right? No, wrong. You think just an ad pops up on your Instagram because of serendipity? No. You out there are the prey, and these companies are the predator, or these cult recruits are the predator, and these cult recruiters are the predator, and the recruits are the prey. Now, Levine calls people who join cults children, even though they are technically adults, Saul Levine. Well, why does he call them children? Well, because these people are not willing to face the uncertainty and risk of the real world. The real world does not have all the answers. If any ideology promises you all the answers, run far, run fast. Man doesn't know all the answers. The human race combined and the internet and AI does not have all the answers. But there are people out there who need certainty. They desperately need certainty. And you can tell a kid, well, because I told you so. And apparently you can tell a cult member because I told you so too. It's kind of sad. Anyway, so yes, they may be better educated, but I don't think they're smarter. It does not make them wiser either. You could say that they lack street smarts. Okay, let's say they lack street smarts. In fact, middle class and upper middle class people are more likely to join. They have the leisure time for it. Most working people are just too busy to join a cult. They don't have time for all that. They're worried about light bills. They're worried about check engine lights. They cannot worry which devil guards which gate of hell. It's just too much. Imagine you're looking at a $1,200 mechanic bill, right? And your friend is here trying to talk to you about angels. She'll talk to you about angels. You got this $1,200 bill. Like, I'm sorry, friend. I am sorry, friend, but I have bigger problems right now. If you can get an angel to fix my transmission, we'll talk. But it is a rich people thing. It is an upper middle class thing. Of course, there are exceptions. Like Jim Jones. He famously recruited from the Black working class. And of course, Father Deviant. But these are exceptions. For the most part, we're talking about middle and upper middle class people and the very wealthy. One last thing that I do want to point out is that there are broad social reasons for people to join cults, and then there are individual reasons. We are all in the same society, but not all of us are going to join a cult. The broad social reasons, the sweeping social reasons why people might want to join cults is the general breakdown of the family structure and the breakdown of religion. Now, Saul Levine points out that the cult followers that he studied came from intact families. They were upper middle class, and they had very low divorce rates. However, they themselves were not married, for the most part. Most of the time, they themselves were not married. So even though they came from intact homes, they were not married themselves. And as we said with Protestants before, their strong churches are a deterrent to joining a cult. But we see around us the breakdown of religion, and it has caused many of our peers to seek spirituality elsewhere. They seek spirituality elsewhere. The modern world is much less religiously affiliated than it has pretty much any time before. That's why I said our situation is different now than it has ever been. We're still seeing belief systems pop up everywhere, and many of the unchurched or seekers are falling into them. I mean, I grew up kind of unchurched. It's not uncommon nowadays. But don't worry, just because our institutions are failing doesn't mean you'll join a cult. There still have to be individual reasons, and this is why Saul Levine calls them children, calls joiners children. See, he posits that these joiners have an unnatural attachment to their parents. Initially, we see our parents as idols. They're just so much bigger than us. They're so great. But as we get older, we see that our parents are just people. Even the best parents out there, are just human beings doing their best. Now, most of us learn this around 12, 13 years old, and it gives us the impetus to go out and figure stuff out for ourselves. But for cult members, they learn this late and they cannot process it properly. Their parents become fallen idols and they go and they seek new idols to fill that space. This is why you cannot coddle your kids. Overbearing parents that do everything for their kids, who tolerate everything, only set up their kids for disappointment later. This is why I say disappoint your kids early, and disappoint your kids often. Just kidding. Don't. Do your best. You'll be fine. Anyway, parents and families don't necessarily know that their relatives are so confused and vulnerable until it's too late. People who end up joining put on this act like they have it all together, like everything's fine, and then the act slips, and then all of a sudden, bam! When it's time to see these people face to face, they're living on a cow farm and working at a deli. They've changed their name. When did this happen? Like that. But it wasn't like that for them. They always knew that there was something a little off. It's just, bam, like that for you. And you can't kidnap them either. Anyway, and no, it's not mostly women who join cults. Both genders join cults. It just depends which cult is right for you. A young man might be more likely to join a cult that values strength and structure. A young woman might be more likely to join a cult centered on crystals and yoga. There's a cult for everybody out there. You're not safe. You're not safe. I've seen a few that could have gotten me. Coulda. Anyway, I don't mean to scare you. Most people will voluntarily leave a cult within 2 years. They're seekers, so they're going to keep seeking. Many get married and they don't want to live on a commune anymore, and they don't want to raise their kids on this commune anymore. They're just over it. Of course, and we've been over this too many times, there are people who give their entire lives to a cult and they let it ruin their children. This is the minority, fortunately. But I know it doesn't feel like the minority when you're a relative of one of these people. Just be optimistic. Chances are she or he will come to their senses and they will leave. And when that happens, you just got to let them know that you're there for them. If this was one of my siblings, who just left a cult, I would welcome them into my home with open arms, and I would nurse them back to health mentally, nurse them back to mental health. And then after I did all that, whether it took a few days or it took a few months or a few years, but once it's all done and once it's all behind us, I would roast them mercilessly. Are you kidding me? You joined a cult. Who do you think you are? Tom Cruise? Aw, I'm sorry. Don't be mad at me. Just let me know when the spaceship is coming. You'll let me know, right? Because we're tight, because I helped you out of that cult. Because that's love. That's real familial love. Anyway, what do you think? And just be honest. Has there ever been a time in your life when you were susceptible to joining a cult? Or did you learn something that changed your mind about cult members from this video? Thank you so much. And subscribe.